Teddy Bridgewater just walked away from the Detroit Lions in the middle of training camp, and his teammates and coaches are revealing why. Bridgewater had already retired and returned before, but this time feels different, and according to Dan Campbell, one concern ultimately weighed heavily on him. Let me catch you up. It's the middle of training camp, and the Detroit Lions are missing a body in the quarterback room. Not injured, not benched, gone. Teddy Bridgewater had been penciled in as Jared Goff's backup for a third stint with the franchise, and then, without much warning, he wasn't there anymore. Bridgewater, 33, was viewed as a respected leader and mentor to players in the Lions locker room, but has missed the past 2 practices for an undisclosed reason. 2 practices, then a Sunday announcement that changed everything for Detroit's depth chart. Dan Campbell stood in front of reporters before that Sunday practice at the Major Performance Center and didn't dance around it. Bridgewater is going to step away. Lions head coach Dan Campbell announced Sunday before the team's training camp practice at the Major Performance Center. No qualifiers, no we'll see. Just a flat statement that the room everyone had grown used to was about to look different. Reporters pushed, was this retirement? Campbell's answer told you everything about how sudden this actually was for the people inside the building. When asked if this was a retirement from Bridgewater, Campbell suggested that's where things currently stand, saying, "I think only he can truly answer that, but I feel like this is where it's at for sure right now. This is where it needs to be and where he felt." That's not the language of a coach who saw this coming weeks in advance. That's the language of a coach still processing it himself. Now here's where the title of this story actually lives, because Campbell wasn't the only voice in that building with something to say. This wasn't just a front office transaction. It rippled through a locker room that had built real relationships with the guy. Start with Jared Goff. The starter Bridgewater had spent parts of 3 seasons mentoring. Goff wasn't asked to eulogize Bridgewater's career on the spot, but when reporters turned to him about who'd be stepping into that QB2 role, his answer said plenty about what the room had lost and what was left to work with. Talking about undrafted rookie Luke Altmyer, the only other quarterback on the roster, Goff said the rookie had been done a really good job, really picking it up quickly and operating the offense at a good pace, which is, I think, probably what you want to see from a rookie. Gets in and out of the huddle, calls the play right, snaps the ball on time, and throws it where it's supposed to go typically. He's awesome to have in the room, and I like Luke a lot. Read between the lines there. Goff's praising a rookie who, days earlier, was the 3rd quarterback in the room behind 2 veterans. Now he's suddenly the guy Goff has to talk up in front of national media because the room got smaller overnight. Then there's the voice of Jerry Jacobs, the Lions cornerback, who'd been outspoken about the quarterback room all camp. Not specifically about Bridgewater's exit, but about the pecking order and belief system inside that facility. Jacobs had been telling anyone who'd listened that Detroit's locker room believed in what they had at quarterback, going as far as to say on SiriusXM that Jared Goff is the best quarterback. He's really top 5 in the NFC. If you want to be honest, if you pull the stat stuff and all that. That kind of confidence from a teammate matters context-wise. It tells you this locker room wasn't panicking about talent, it was losing a person. And that person, according to the people who'd played alongside him, was somebody very specific. During his previous stint with Detroit, he served as a valuable mentor for young players like Jameson Williams. Not just Goff. Younger guys, receivers, the kind of player who spends more time helping other position groups than worrying about his own snap count. That's the piece players kept coming back to when explaining who Bridgewater was inside that building. Not the stat sheet, not the win total, but what he did in the meeting rooms nobody sees on television. Detroit staff had said as much even years earlier, when Campbell first tried to put words to it. "Teddy's been unbelievable for a lot of people here," Campbell said. "He's a huge asset for us, aside from the obvious, which is if we need him. He's a guy that can go in and win for us. But, man, he does so many things behind the scenes that I think a lot of people don't even realize. He's a valuable asset for our team." So when the news broke that he was walking away mid-camp, it wasn't just a transaction line on a depth chart. It was players losing the guy who quietly ran extra film sessions, who talked young receivers through coverage reads, who'd been doing that job for 3 separate stints with the same franchise. Campbell, visibly working through his own emotions about it, gave the fullest picture of why the room felt this the way it did. "I've known Bridgewater a long time, and man, the human being is unbelievable," he said. "Certainly, the player, everything he's about, the kind of teammate he is, and the way he prepares, always played the game up here," pointing to his head, "and had a huge heart. He's going to be missed. Then came the detail that explained more about Bridgewater's mindset than any stat ever could. Campbell revealed what had actually been weighing on him in those final days at camp. And it wasn't about snaps, or a roster spot, or a contract number. Campbell also noted that the veteran quarterback was concerned he was letting the team down, saying his biggest worry was letting us down. That's the sentence players kept repeating to each other in that building. Not he got hurt, not he lost a competition. He was worried about being a burden to guys he'd spent years mentoring. And once you hear that detail, the entire exit reads differently. Less like a man walking away from football, and more like a man protecting a locker room he genuinely cared about. By the time Sunday's practice actually started, Bridgewater's locker had already been cleared administratively. The Lions officially placed Bridgewater on the reserve retired list ahead of their Sunday practice. The move was real, it was filed, and the room had to adjust in real time. During camp, during the exact window when quarterback rooms are supposed to be settling their pecking order, not losing a piece of it. So that's the moment. That's the why the players and coaches were handed cold on a Sunday. But to actually understand why a 33-year-old with 3 separate stints in Detroit reached this point, you have to go back. Because this wasn't Bridgewater's first time saying goodbye to this building, and it wasn't even his first time saying goodbye to football altogether. To understand why this particular exit hit differently, you need to understand how many times Teddy Bridgewater had already left and come back. This wasn't a guy who signed once and rode it out. This was a cycle, and Detroit had lived through it 3 separate times. It started in 2023. Bridgewater, 33, had 3 different stints with the Lions starting in 2023 as quarterback Jared Goff's primary backup. That first stint came on a modest deal, a depth signing nobody expected to matter much. He eventually reunited with Campbell on the Lions on a 1-year, $3 million contract in 2023 to serve as Goff's backup. The connection between the two ran deeper than a locker room assignment. It went back to New Orleans, where Campbell coached tight ends and Bridgewater backed up a franchise legend. Bridgewater and Campbell have a relationship dating back to their time together in New Orleans, where the passer backed up Drew Brees and Campbell was the tight ends coach. Campbell never let that memory go quiet. Years later, he was still telling the story of the week Bridgewater saved a season in New Orleans, using it almost like proof of who this man was under pressure. I'll never forget 2019 when Drew Brees got injured, and we had just gone out to the Rams and got beat out there. Drew had his thumb injury, and we lost him for 5 weeks. Teddy stepped in, and we won 5 in a row, man, Campbell said. That's the resume Campbell was drawing on when he brought Bridgewater to Detroit. But that first Lions stint barely gave him the field. After playing for several NFL teams, he joined the Lions for the 2023 season, appearing in only 1 game. 1 snap, 1 kneel down to close out a blowout. And by the end of that season, with barely any playing time to show for it, Bridgewater told the Detroit Free Press he was ready to walk away for good. He wasn't shy about explaining the why back then either. Injuries had reframed everything for him years earlier, and that perspective never left. When I got hurt, I realized that I'm only a football player for 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon. Bridgewater said, outside of that, I'm Theodore Bridgewater. So it just put everything into perspective, and it really helped me not even have to think about not being a starter anymore. He wanted to coach. He wanted to focus on his sons. So he retired, the first time. That retirement lasted less than a year. Bridgewater originally announced his retirement from the NFL at the end of the 2023 season, and then became the head coach of his alma mater, Miami Northwestern High School, this year, which he just led to a Class 3A Florida State championship. He wasn't just dabbling in coaching, he was winning. Bridgewater guided Miami Northwestern to a Florida 3A state championship with a dominant 41-0 victory over Jacksonville Reigns, with his team finishing the season 12-2, showing exceptional dominance during their playoff run by outscoring opponents 262-12 across 5 games. Then, out of nowhere, the itch came back. Ian Rappaport broke the news that the retired quarterback wanted back in, and Detroit, riding a real Super Bowl push, welcomed him for round 2. NFL insider Ian Rappaport was the first to report that quarterback Teddy Bridgewater is officially ending his retirement to sign with the Detroit Lions, having retired the previous season after recently coaching his high school football team to a state championship. Fans reacted the way fans always react to a beloved backup coming home for a title run. Equal parts excited and amused at what it meant for the starter's job security. Jared Goff is shaking in his boots, a fan tweeted. Nobody seriously thought Bridgewater was there to take the job. He was there for exactly what he'd always been there for: insurance, wisdom, and a locker room presence. That second stint barely got him on the field either. Following that season, Bridgewater officially announced his retirement in February 2024, and later restarted his NFL career and signed a one-year contract with the Lions in December 2024, worth $1,210,000. He served his purpose during the playoff run, mentoring, preparing, staying ready, and then left again when the Buccaneers came calling for the 2025 season. Veteran quarterback Teddy Bridgewater signed a one-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after visiting the team and passing his physical, having retired from the NFL in February 2024, but returned late that season for a brief stint with the Detroit Lions. Tampa gave him almost nothing in terms of snaps. Last season, he signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he appeared in 4 games and completed 8 of 15 passes for 62 yards. A backup's backup role behind Baker Mayfield, barely touching the field, riding the bench in a city that wasn't Detroit. So when he came back to the Lions this most recent offseason, it wasn't framed as some triumphant homecoming. It was framed as exactly what it was: a well-traveled veteran taking a third crack at a room he already knew inside and out. Bridgewater, who officially signed with the Detroit Lions, had been with the team twice before, first backing up Jared Goff during the 2023 season, before briefly returning in December 2024 for Detroit's playoff push. By that point, everybody in the building, Goff, Campbell, the front office, knew the pattern. Teddy comes, Teddy mentors, Teddy leaves, Teddy comes back. 3 times over the course of just a few years. So when Sunday's announcement hit, there was a part of the organization that had almost been trained to expect this exact outcome eventually. Except this time, something in the room felt different. Campbell said it himself, and he wasn't hedging. Head coach Dan Campbell said he believes that this retirement could stick for Bridgewater, who had previously retired after the 2023 season only to return to the Lions the next season. Not "we hope he's back," not "the door's open." This time, the door felt closed. To understand why this cycle finally seemed to end for good, you have to look at what was actually happening off the field during his time away. The parts of Teddy Bridgewater's story that had nothing to do with the quarterback room, but everything to do with why he kept walking toward it and away from it. Here's the part of the story that most people watching the NFL side of things missed entirely. Bridgewater's time away from Detroit wasn't spent sitting on a beach. It was spent building something at his old high school. And that project almost blew up in his face before it ever got him back onto an NFL roster. Bridgewater is Miami born and raised, and Miami Northwestern Senior High School is where his whole football story began. Bridgewater was born in Miami, Florida, and attended Miami Northwestern Senior High School, and as a 4-star prospect by Rivals.com, he committed to playing college football at the University of Louisville. When he stepped away from the NFL the first time, going back there to coach wasn't some vanity project. It was personal, and it worked spectacularly, right up until it didn't. Weeks after that Class 3A title, the program he'd built got hit with an investigation. Weeks after Miami Northwestern Senior High School suspended NFL quarterback turned football coach Teddy Bridgewater, the QB is planning to make an NFL return and leave the high school program, with Bridgewater having been suspended by his alma mater due to a Florida High School Athletic Association investigation into alleged impermissible program benefits. What actually happened was almost sweet, in a way that only made the punishment feel more absurd. Bridgewater had been paying for things out of his own pocket that the school wasn't providing, and asking for help covering the rest. Bridgewater was suspended for the 2025-2026 high school football season for providing impermissible benefits to his players, having provided Uber rides, a preseason training camp, pre-game meals, and post-game recovery services for the team, all paid for by Bridgewater. He was buying his kids Ubers to practice and feeding them before games, and the state came down on him for it. The backlash to that suspension was loud enough that it actually changed state law. His suspension was overturned, and the Florida State Senate then passed the Teddy Bridgewater Act in February 2026, which now allows head football coaches to spend up to $15,000 of their own money on their teams per year. Think about that for a second. A backup NFL quarterback's generosity toward teenage athletes led directly to a statewide rule change bearing his name. That's not a footnote. That's a legacy piece that exists completely outside of anything he ever did on an NFL field. But the suspension, even after being overturned, seemed to sour something for him about the high school coaching path, at least for the moment. Rather than stick it out through the mess, he pivoted. Teddy Bridgewater plans to make an NFL return, with the quarterback wanting to make an official return to the NFL. Football, the actual playing of it, became the cleaner option compared to navigating state athletic association politics. That return brought him to Tampa for the 2025 season, then back to Detroit this offseason on modest terms. Bridgewater signed a one-year, $1.8 million deal with the Lions in March. Not the kind of contract that signals a franchise is building around him. The kind of contract that signals a locker room wants him around for what he brings that doesn't show up in a box score. And Detroit staff had been explicit for years about exactly what that was. Campbell had connected Bridgewater's high school detour directly to his value in an NFL quarterback room, treating the two as the same skill wearing different uniforms. The ability to develop people, not just play the position. That thread runs from Miami Northwestern all the way back to Ford Field. And it's the reason players around Goff kept pointing to him as something closer to an extra coach than a third-string arm. That's also why when Bridgewater rejoined the Lions this offseason, the framing from the team wasn't about a quarterback competition. It was about experience returning to a room that had gotten used to having him in it. Detroit's beat coverage noted that Bridgewater signed with the Lions to back up Jared Goff for a third stint with the organization, and the tone throughout camp reporting treated it as a formality. The room welcoming back a known quantity, not auditioning a stranger. He talked openly, even years earlier, about what actually kept pulling him back to locker rooms instead of retirement for good. It wasn't the stat sheet, it was the small stuff. The stuff that doesn't show up anywhere except in how a team feels about itself day to day. You talk about a team that is young, quick to run to their phones after practice, after games, and you see guys like mingling and just having conversations. Ping pong, card table, cornhole, guys sitting on the couch, like that's what it's about. That's the league that I came into, and I'm happy that I get to just see and be a part of this great locker room. That quote given during his first stint in Detroit tells you almost everything about why he kept coming back for round 2 and round 3. He wasn't chasing snaps, he was chasing that room, the card table, the cornhole, the version of football that happens away from the cameras. So by the time this most recent training camp rolled around, Bridgewater wasn't walking into Allen Park as a stranger auditioning for a roster spot. He was walking back into a room he'd helped build for a third time, at 33 years old, with a high school investigation, a statewide law change, and 2 prior retirements all sitting behind him. Which makes what happened next, the actual reason this particular camp stint ended the way it did, land very differently than it would have for almost anyone else at his position. So if Bridgewater had already retired once, unretired, retired again technically, and come back a third time, why did this specific training camp become the one where it finally stuck? The answer sits in a handful of very specific details that the Lions' own reporting laid out plainly. Start with the roster math. Detroit didn't sign Bridgewater in March to compete for a starting job. They signed him into a room that already had a clear hierarchy. The 33-year-old was in line to be Detroit's backup behind starter Jared Goff. That's it. That's the entire assignment. Hold a clipboard, mentor a young quarterback room, be ready if something went wrong. But camp rosters are unforgiving in a way regular season rosters aren't. Dan Campbell's Lions entered training camp with just 3 quarterbacks on the roster. 3 bodies: Goff, Bridgewater, and an undrafted rookie. That's an extremely thin room for an NFL team with real championship aspirations, and it meant every practice rep mattered more than it normally would for a 33-year-old journeyman fighting for a job he'd essentially already been handed twice before. And then quietly, Bridgewater started missing time. Not with an announced injury, not with a designation. Just gone from a couple of sessions, with the team offering no real explanation. Bridgewater, 33, was viewed as a respected leader and mentor to players in the Lions locker room, but has missed the past 2 practices for an undisclosed reason. That silence, in retrospect, was the tell. Something was already shifting before the Sunday announcement made it official. What Campbell revealed afterward gave the clearest window yet into what was actually going through Bridgewater's head during those missed sessions. It wasn't fear of losing a competition. It wasn't a physical issue holding him back. According to Campbell, Bridgewater was carrying something closer to guilt, and his biggest worry was letting us down. That's the type of guy he is, and he's not, Campbell said. Sit with that phrasing for a second. A 33-year-old with 15 years in the league, 3 separate stints with the same franchise, a Pro Bowl on his resume. Worried about letting down a room he'd have to leave anyway once his body or the calendar caught up with him. That's not a competition he lost. That's a decision he made preemptively, on his own terms, before anyone had to make it for him. Compare that to how quickly the front office moved once the decision became final. Because the speed of Detroit's response tells you they weren't blindsided by the possibility, even if the exact Sunday timing caught people off guard. The Lions officially placed the quarterback on the reserve retired list following Campbell's announcement. Same day, no waiting period, no extended negotiation to talk him out of it. And within hours, they had already replaced him. Hours after Detroit made Bridgewater's reserve retired list transaction official, the team signed veteran Joshua Dobbs to a one-year deal. That's not the pace of a front office scrambling in shock. That's the pace of a front office that had already lined up a contingency, likely sensing exactly where things were headed during those two missed practices. Dobbs wasn't a stranger to the building either, which made the transition smoother than it might have looked from the outside. The Lions signed veteran quarterback Joshua Dobbs to a one-year, $1.425 million contract with $475,000 fully guaranteed in the wake of Bridgewater's retirement, marking his second stint with the Lions after he was on Detroit's practice squad in 2022. A familiar face stepping into a room that had just lost one of its most respected voices. The order of operations here matters for understanding the why behind the exit. This wasn't a player getting cut and dressing it up as retirement. It wasn't a coach forcing a veteran out to make room for a younger arm. Every account from inside that building points to Bridgewater making this call himself, then the front office reacting to it with the kind of speed that suggests they respected the decision rather than fought it. And that respect showed up clearly in how Campbell chose to close the door on it publicly, rather than leave it hanging open like the last two times. Campbell noted that he feels Bridgewater's decision to step away could be permanent this time. He didn't say that about the first retirement. He didn't say it about the second, brief one either. This time, the language was final in a way it hadn't been before. Part of why it landed as final is the shape of the roster left behind. With Bridgewater's exit and Dobbs' arrival, the numbers now show a clean two deep behind Goff, instead of the crowded three-man competition camp had opened with. Goff is the unquestioned starter for Detroit as he enters his sixth season with the Lions, with Dobbs, who backed up Patriots quarterback Drake May last year, presumed to be the backup after Detroit signed him to a one-year deal. Altmaier, the undrafted rookie who'd spent camp absorbing everything Bridgewater and the coaching staff could teach him, now sits third, no longer needing to leapfrog a veteran to get reps, but also no longer having that veteran in the room to lean on. That's the piece that hits hardest when you line it all up. Bridgewater didn't leave because he lost a battle. He left because he decided on his own that his window for helping this specific room had closed, and that staying longer risked becoming exactly what he feared most: a liability instead of an asset to the people who trusted him 3 times over. Which brings the story to where it actually sits today. Not as a controversy, not as a scandal, but as a locker room adjusting to the absence of a guy who spent years being more valuable off the stat sheet than on it. Spent years being more valuable off the stat sheet than on it. So where does this actually leave the Lions? And where does it leave Teddy Bridgewater himself? Because the story doesn't end with a roster transaction. It ends with a locker room figuring out how to move forward without one of its steadiest voices, and a 33-year-old figuring out what comes after 15 years of showing up. Start with the numbers, because they tell you exactly what kind of career just quietly closed. He finishes his career with 15,182 passing yards, 75 touchdowns, and 47 interceptions, while completing 66.3% of his passes, for a 90.3 passer rating in 83 games with 65 starts. A 33-32 record as a starter across 6 different franchises before Detroit. A Pro Bowl nod early in his career, and a reputation that outran his stat line by a wide margin. But ask anyone who actually shared a quarterback room with him, and the numbers aren't what comes up first. It's the mentorship. It's the way he treated backup reps like they mattered just as much as starting ones. Detroit's own team reporting kept circling back to that exact idea, describing how one of the many reasons Bridgewater remained someone NFL teams wanted in their locker room was due to his mentorship abilities. Understanding his role as a backup and helping the starter on a weekly basis before, during, and after the season, including working with Goff in 2023 and 2024, as he developed into one of the best pure passers in the league, in an explosive Lions offensive scheme. That's a real credit to hand a backup quarterback, helping shape a 5-time Pro Bowl caliber passer during the exact seasons that passer's career took off. Whatever else Bridgewater's stat line says, that piece of his resume lives inside somebody else's success now, permanently. The Lions moved fast to fill the roster hole, but nobody filling it pretended to be replacing what Bridgewater actually provided. It would be highly unusual for a playoff-caliber team to enter the season with an undrafted rookie signal caller as a QB2, and whoever the Lions add behind center will likely compete with Altmaier for opportunities. Dobbs walks into a room now missing its steadiest voice, tasked with doing a version of the same job, but without 15 years and 3 stints of built-up trust to lean on yet. For Bridgewater personally, this chapter closes with a career that reads less like a highlight reel and more like a study in staying power. His career trajectory took a turn after suffering a torn ACL and dislocated knee during training camp in 2016, and he missed that entire year and appeared in just 1 game in 2017 before his tenure with Minnesota came to an end. That injury could have ended things right there for a lot of players. Instead, it launched a decade of bouncing from roster to roster, each stop adding another line to a resume built almost entirely on trust rather than talent alone. And now, according to everyone around him, that decade-plus run is actually finished. Not paused, not see you next training camp. Finished in the way that only really shows up once someone stops fighting the instinct to come back. What happens next for him isn't a mystery. He's already shown the league exactly where his attention goes when football isn't demanding it. The coaching itch that pulled him toward Miami Northwestern hasn't gone anywhere. That's not a small thing to leave behind. A lot of Pro Bowlers retire with highlight reels. Bridgewater retires with a piece of state legislation. The machine resetting itself within hours of losing a piece nobody wanted to lose. The room adjusts because rooms always adjust.